Hello, everybody. I'm going to do my introduction in English tonight, as our talk is going to be in English as well. And I'd like to welcome you all to our lecture series, All Propaganda, Communication, Media and Power in Eastern Europe's Past and Present. I'm very happy to welcome Vlada Baranova. Right now, Vlada is a scholarship holder at the Nordost Institute. Previously, she was teaching and researching at the Higher School of Economics in St. Petersburg. Now, Vlada's special field is sociolinguistics in general and language politics, multilingualism, and minority languages in particular. And this, in my opinion, fits very well into our program's focus on communication and power. For instance, language politics can be used as a means for claiming ethnic homogenization. Or, on the other hand, insisting on language rights can also be a means of political empowerment. So, Vlada, we're very excited about hearing your talk tonight. Thank you for coming here, and you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. Vielen Dank für die freundliche Einführung, David. Guten Abend, alles. And from this point, I also switched to English because it would be faster. It will be faster and better. Thank you again, David, for your introduction, for your kindly introduction, and thank you for organizers. This particular talk and cycle of seminars, cycle of lectures, because it's really very important topic, and now it's very actual topics about propaganda and communication. And thank you for hosting me here in Lüneburg and the possibility to work here. My today's talk will be on multilingualism during the war. So it's very recent study and ongoing project. So it's just like my preliminary discussion and preliminary results. And in particular, I want to discuss language ideology, contested identities, and language activism in contemporary Russia. My previous study dealt with language activism and different revitalization efforts of people who want to revitalize minority languages of Russia in Russia, of Russian Federation. But now I want to discuss how they work changed and are changing now during the context of Russian invasion of Ukraine. Yeah, maybe one preliminary important remark. Unfortunately, I have some, it's quite sensitive topics, and unfortunately, I want to include into my talk quite unpleasant photo and discussion, because I want to discuss briefly not only the anti-war propaganda, but also pro-war, supporting the war. So it will be some unpleasant photo like this. You can see that in the first slide, there are two examples of complex signs that includes a symbol of different scripts and languages. So in the first slide, you can see Tatar language with transformation from Cyrillic Z to Latin Z, like a symbol of current military force. And in Tatar, it means we can, so it possibly refers to можем повторить, Russian slogan, we can repeat it or something like this. And the second, the anti-war sign consists of Chuvash word Kileshu, Russian translation or Russian interpretation, and the strike cross out Z. So it's discussion, this preliminary sign that people want to change and transform into the other symbol. My research question for today, my question for today is how and why people use the minority languages expressing their attitudes towards the war and their political position, how they manipulate the language and scripts during the private communication and official communication, so from propaganda and from official media. Yeah, some words on my data, because I work with different materials. Firstly, I deal with observation and photos of linguistic landscape. Linguistic landscape is an umbrella term for different signs like posters, stickers, graffiti, mobile signs, like text on T-shirt or on the bags and so on. Also, I'm trying to collect the interview with language activists involved in the anti-war process or supported the war. It should be noted that it's difficult to find people that for this interview, and there is some problem with such interview, especially for the second group. For interview with people supported the war, it's difficult to find respondents for me. And also I include a lot of online materials from blogs, different performances, video, or photos, media. And I mostly deal with Kalmyk, Buryat, and Chuvash language. Kalmyk and Buryat are two Mongolic languages, and as a field linguist, I'm dealing with Kalmyk a lot, and Chuvash is Turkic languages, but sometimes I will also will refer to Yakut, Tatar, and other Turkic languages. Yeah, returning to the idea of interview, it's important to understand that it's a sensitive topic, and the position of a researcher is not it's not like a researcher just neutral, objective outer mediator or translator who just represents the voices of the participants. We are not just given voice, we reconstruct it. And our own voice also is included in this picture, in this diverse picture. So discussing with my respondent during my interview with, for example, journalist supporting the war, posting like editor-in-chief of one newspaper in minority language, in one minority language. I also try to, for example, I try to avoid the special nomination. I try to avoid the words war or special military operation, because it was just a position, and I should discuss it without expressing my own position here, but finding the neutral tone. At the same time, here in the interview after it, I should say that I'm not fully neutral. Really, it looks like a little bit aggressive, really. I asked him about his posts, and I asked why he posted it. And you can see that there are a lot of hesitation and pauses during his answer. So it's difficult to him to find explanation, to talk with me about it. So it's bad communication, it's miscommunication, because he maybe we knowing each other quite a lot, maybe 10 years, but we are not a good friends. So maybe it's a problem of trust and a fear to have a problem, or maybe he understands that my tone, my question a little bit that I support different positions, so it may be the ideological context. Anyway, we should take into account the position of a researcher when we discuss sensitive topics. So it's important to understand it and somehow integrate into our analysis. Very briefly about my theoretical background. I follow an ethnographic approach to language policy and planning that take into account individual efforts, not only like official level, state level of language planning, institutional level, but individual efforts. And Nancy Hornberg and her colleagues state that people interpreted and at times resist language policy and planning. So even during this quite repressive context, according to minority languages, people can somehow deal with it and even resist and express different position. And I discuss linguistic landscape, but it should be noted that linguistic science is just semiotic science. It's not just a linguistic science, but a semiotic science. And there is a ideological context, and the communication is ideological act. When you crossed out the Z, you express also a position. As important issue, as important notion for me is language ideology, and it should be noted that for Russia there is monolingual language ideology, and most people, even in multilingual country, de facto multilingual, expect to monolingualism and good proficiency of Russia and avoiding other minority languages and so on. So it's quite strong position. At the same time, Ingrid Piller states the dominant mainstream discourses emphasizing monolingualism and homogeneity lead to neglect of linguistic diversity. And strengthening the argument, it can lead not only to neglecting diversity, but to decreasing of linguistic diversity itself and language shift. The current repressive context and the colonial discourse, so-called Russian bold, accompanying the war, could lead to a new wave of neglecting, to a new strengthening the monolingual language ideology and neglecting of the linguistic rights of minority language speakers. At the same time, we can see a small increase of usage of minority languages, and I'll show the different context, including the communication about the war and expressing different position. The notion of reflexivity is also important for me because small languages exist, as Sari Petikainen and her colleagues state, in cluttered fields of competing ideologies. So it's not only one monolingual ideology, like one dominant ideology from the official level, but there are different repertoires, different way of performing it, and they communicate and interact with each other. It's important for minority languages. Decorn states that language activism is mostly, first of all, social project, more than linguistic in some consideration. And my tentative description of language activism, I underline some important issues like non-governmental character. It deals with linguistic inequality. It based on efforts of individuals and an organization or authority. It changed language practices and it is interrelated with language ideologies, our previous notion. Yeah, so about language activism in Russia. It's important that diversity of project, language activism is not homogeneous. Some participants claim linguistic rights and the status of language, education, and so on. Some other deal with cultural and educational revitalization project. Undertakings of language activists may deal or not with political agenda. There is a position, there is a distinction between language advocacy that is directed to the climbing of linguistic rights and rising the status of language, and cultural project as like just part of the educational cultural program. And minority language activism, as I showed in my previous project in Russia, mostly avoids the discussion of the linguistic rights, and it's implemented in a variety of cultural, educational, and other project revitalization. So you can see the passage from the interview from my previous project 1 year ago, a little bit, 1.5. So she states that they moved on the culture. They avoid any political communication, any political position, any political agenda. It should be mentioned that Gazel Yusupova calls similar approaches, like she discussed it into the context of the politics of fear in Russia, that prevent from the political organization, political discussion, and political agenda of minority ethnic group, minority languages, and so on. So it's just like cultural and safety way to discuss minority languages. So what changed now? You can see two passages, two extracts from the interview in my recent project, in my current project, and my respondent told that language activism continued to do some linguistic project, some language project, and he called it a safety protest, безопасный протест. So they still avoid from the political agenda and the linguistic rights. At the same time, you can see the passage from blog of language activism. He claims that it's necessary to discuss a political agenda, linguistic rights. Not only it couldn't be just like courses for revitalization of minority language, but it's necessary to include the discussion of political right and civic right of multilingual people and minority group. So the diversity of project that can be roughly divided into the cultural and cultural dimension and linguistic rights, linguistic advocacy. This distribution slowly and gradually changes now. So we can see the more important role of political discussion and political agenda now. Yeah. So to my data, it's a part of my materials related to linguistic landscape, and we can see a lot of anti-war signs that first in Chuvash, were against war. The second in Yakut. So it's communication with co-ethnic, with people who trust the communication in native language. So it's more important way, more important message for them when you write it in native language, and at the same time it's maybe more safety way to express your opinion, because not all the policemen can read in Chuvashian or Yakut, so it's a way to avoid from the penalty. Some activists use the mobile signs, like you can see Vartsashuk in Chuvash on the t-shirt, and a bag with 3 languages, Estonian, Tatar, and Udmurt, that all the languages are important for the author of the message. And in the interview, the author of the bag explained that it was relatively safe, and she wasn't stopped by police because they do not understand both Estonian and Udmurt and Tatar. At the same time, people in Moscow recognize and understand Tatar. Tatar is not like it's minority language, but for millions of speakers, so it's just quite. So the medium message, Sugishkuyuk, was understandable to many people, and not only for Tatar, but for other Turkic speaking people, for example, from Kyrgyzstan and from other countries. So it was effective communication, it was understandable message, but it was safety way to express the position. Yeah, there are a number of art projects and performances, anti-war discussion and communication. The most important, the most influential is by Alisa Gorshenina, an artist from Nizhny Tagil, Siberia. For example, she came out on a picket in April, but later she understood that picket is already not a safety way to express protest, and she start a series of performance. I hear the voices of Russia, слышу голоса России. This minority languages from 12 to 20 different languages, mostly from Siberia, so her areas, her region. There's no war in the first performance in the black cloth piece, and here you can see the heart, medically, and this pain in minority languages, in a number of minority languages. Yeah, as important point that I want to discuss is the increasing of a multilingual blogging and media, and increasing of minority languages in the public space and in the discussion of political topics. And you can see some examples. First is the Russian foreign agent law requires anyone who receives support from outside Russia or is under influence from outside Russia to register and declare. So once labeled as a foreign agent, person or organization are obliged to mark all the publication to the disclosure that is being given, like foreign agent, and you can see this disclaimer in Chuvash before every post of the person who obliged to do it. And the second example is just discussing this co-ethnics other Tatar speaking people not to participate in the war. The second example are from the next example are from translation of manifest by feminist anti-war resistance, very important and influential network for anti-war protest, and they asked to translate the ideas to different minority languages. He's Moksha, one of Uralic languages. So, and the right example is from new media, online newspaper, Beda Media. Most materials, most articles are in Russian, but there are materials in Buryat, and here there is example in Buryat about the Free Buryatia Foundation and their work with in Buryatia. So, summing up this part, even in the oppressive context, we can see the increasing number of minority languages in the public space, in the media, in the linguistic landscape, and so on. Why it's important for people? Because the minority language activism and activist and like artist and anti-war activist without like ethnic background or minority language, native language, tried to discuss the colonial perspective. And it's important for them to compare the position of minority groups in Russia and the war with Ukraine, the invasion of Ukraine. So they see some parallels between this process. Other important issue that discuss one of my respondents that many people seek and many people are searching new identity. If they have like any minority roots, they do not want still to be Russians, Russian citizens, or Russian like ethnically Ruskimi, and they possibly they find new identity if they like relatives or some ancestor were Kalmyk or other from other native from other minority groups. Maybe I should return to the similarities between the war in Ukraine and the xenophobia and discrimination of minority language speakers in Russia, inside Russia. And you can see some examples from first from the Twitter and second from the manifesto of feminist anti-war resistance. So they state that it's really the same process, that derogative term for different ethnic groups like Chukchi and others. It's a way to create a new derogative term for Ukrainians, like Ukry, and it's the same process of discrimination and like imperial attitudes, imperial approach to minority. And as in manifesto of feminist anti-war resistance, Russia blames the Ukraine for neglecting the linguistic rights of Russian-speaking minorities or minority, but in our own state, there are a lot of problems with discrimination of minority groups, and only Russians only Russian is main language and государствообразующий in the constitution. And there are ways to find in the process, in the anti-war protest, like umbrella term, some cover term for new resistance, for not only like label for minority language, for minority group, but finding the general term. And you can see the reclaiming and the possibility to use a previous derogatory term like natsmen, that is like not a good word, it's a bad term, but they reclaim it and try to describe themselves as a natsmen. So it's a way to unify all minority groups and to find the new name for them, like this new words, you know, sometimes people reclaim it for discussing the experience. And of course, it ways to discussion of possible independence and possible separation from Russia. And you can see some also from linguistic landscape. Free Bashkortostan, Iraqli Bashkortostan. So it's a slogan for separation from Russia, for finding a new way and a new state for them. The second part, and it should be shorter than the first because I have more data on anti-war discussion, but less on related to pro-war linguistic landscape and media. But anyway, I want to discuss some examples. First, you can see two pictures. First is Hamar Yal, and in Chuvash it means our village. Literally it means our village, but it means земляки, fellow countrymen, together or something like this. It's important notion for Chuvash culture. And you can see that it's sign on the tank, so they think that it's important to write it in Chuvash and express the and mark the ethnic identity and linguistic identity during the war, during the participation here. So it's quite unusual, right? It's just it's a strange position, but they discuss. For example, in the official public interview, the author of the first picture told that he wrote the Hamar Yal after the death of his co-ethnic from the same village, and then he wanted to express his the Jewish identity, something like this. I'm not sure how it's a part of propaganda, but nevertheless, they did it sometimes. They wrote in minority languages. Second example, I'm not from the grassroots like this linguistic landscape on the tongue, but the official and the part of propaganda, because the volunteer units, there are a lot of volunteer units, battalions from the different regions, but in the ethnic region, in the multi-ethnic republic, it's mostly it's often has like a minority language title. Even it's a multi-ethnic. It's not only Chuvash. There are not only Chuvash people in the atoll, but they use the significant notion, Jewish word for Volga river, for representing that it's like it's a part of Jewish identity. It's a part of not only regional but national ethnic identity. And the same, you can see the examples from Udmurt and others. And in official, this extract from official newspaper that it's for unification, fellow countrymen, земляков, and for supporting that they support the course of the military special operation, and they shoulder by shoulder, side by side, they go there together. So it's a combination of local and ethnic identity with a strong emphasis, strong focus on the ethnic identity, with and minority language identity. And of course, it's a call for job. Yeah, you know that it's just for people who can be volunteers, can be drafted, mobilized here. Yeah, as a media, not so interesting because, yeah, there are a lot of my work with this minority language media and official and non-official was relatively easy. I've found the minority term like in Chuvash Yatarlasar Operatsiye, it's for special military operation, and other term for war. So I find the articles this pro-war and anti-war position, but it will be more or less the same. It is more or less the same than in Russian. So it's pro-war propaganda. It looks like translation from Russian. So it just not a new expression, not a new position. But maybe the language itself is a message because it's like for unification, for like they are all together, something like this, for their special group. But the content is more or less the same. Yeah, it's important that most media discuss and represents federal news and federal communication, but the local context concerns, for example, the death of a person in the first example, or like a special program for crowdsourcing the goods for force, so it's for draftees, so it's just a like small part of local content in here. Other important way to use minority language in the propaganda are concerts and like festivals. I call it performing multilingualism, multiculturalism. You can see, unfortunately, we can't see and hear the video, but it's it's together, and there is a Buryat opera and like special clothes that looks a little bit like military clothes, something like this. And the first is in Chuvash, so also for soldiers. It should be noted that the festivals or performing forms of ethnic tradition, like dance, are quite typical for the Soviet period. The legacy of imperial power is established through the festivals. In post-Soviet period, such festivals are not so popular, less popular, but still exist. For example, the representation of multilingualism and ethnic diversity has focused on the concert on the festival for representing the migrational culture, mobility and migration. For example, Mark Simon describes, and his colleagues describe houses of friendship of people, дома дружбы, representing the different ethnic culture and different minority cultures. And now such performing identity became more influential, and it's quite like post-imperial or re-engagement. So it represents the native belonging and in the multi-ethnical Russian state. And a new approach it's a relatively new idea to represent it's a song. I'm Russian, but not I'm Россиянин, but я русский. So the people in Komi, ethnic Komi ensemble and dance performed я русский. And the text я русский, я иду до конца, I am Russian, I go to the end. Я русский, моя кровь от отца, my blood from my father. So it's really very strange. And other ethnic minority groups also performed the song Я русский, but it's not a part of like state identity, you know, like я россиянин, but it's like ethnical term. And during the last months, it's a series of performances. Я русский from even from very like visible multi-ethnic context like Komi or others. Yeah, and the last point for today, the usage of some slogans in the same context that pro-war and some, I don't know, I'm not sure that it's anti-war protest. It's a, maybe you know this case, the people from, mobilized people from Chuvashia launched strike chanting Hamar Yau. It's the same slogan that we can see on the tank. We are together, our village, and so on. So Hamar Yau is a slogan for the protest. It's not anti-war protest because a draft is the training center signed a protest to demand payment. And they refused to fight in Ukraine before they are paid and they received their money. So it's not an anti-war protest itself, but it's a kind of protest. And they use the same slogan than a person who participated in war and wrote Hamar Yau on the tank. So it's the same discourse maybe for different position, and the discourses about minority languages are far from official level. So there is a communication between different Chuvash people that it's important for them only for regional level, but not for official state. Yeah. So to conclude, the increasing number of minority languages in the media or in the linguistic landscape make more visible minority group and their political rights and their linguistic rights and their political agenda. It's important to understand that the idea of linguistic citizenship presupposes that we discuss the linguistic behavior, linguistic practice and communication like a way to legitimize in institutional frameworks and create new groups, new stakeholders, yeah, and maybe doing them visible, doing them a part of the process and part of the communication at the federal level, at the political level. But I'm not sure that these actions, these performances have a strong impact on the community. So it's a part of internal communication among activists, but not very influential. I mean, but maybe it can change. I'm not sure. According to as far for pro-war discussion and pro-war activities, yeah, Catherine Graeber in her book on minority media in Buryatia shows that the most widespread discourse adopts the notion of autonomy within the multi-ethnic, multinational state, rather than the conception of indigenous right or sovereignty or separation, something like this. And most of the pro-war context also emphasize the idea of minority inside the majority, inside the multi-ethnic, multinational Russian state. So it differ a lot from the position of activists who discuss separation, segregation, and independence for the republic. So it's a different discourse, but it's a discourse that inherited in the in many republics, in the cultural discussion in the discourses during the maybe past 100 years. It's interesting to me that they use a similar symbolic signs in more official like propaganda and more bottom-up linguistic landscape. So returning to the notion of reflexivity from Petikainen and her colleagues, we can see that the cluttered field of ideologies around minority languages interact between each other, even more than with dominant languages and with majorities. So they communicate somehow with other people who write in Hamarjal or crowded, and it's more different. It's more diverse perspective for discussing the process, discussing the Russian society, not like a homogeneous society, but very heterogeneous with different groups that communicate with each other more than the federal level and with dominant language. So yeah, it's my references. So I hope that reflexivity as a notion, as a theoretical approach, can help to describe this diverse picture. And it's important for me, not only as a research project, not only as for academic purposes, but also for more broadly from the civic identity, to discuss Russian society and the different opinions and attitudes in the more diverse perspective, this heterogeneous context of different groups from the bottom up and from the regional level, because I claim that the regional discussion in minority language sometimes is more important for other people, for other people from the region, from the area, than official level of propaganda. Yeah, so thank you very much, and I really appreciate your question and discussion.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Speak into the microphone.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Vlada, for these fascinating insights into your field work, and also offering us new perspectives that we as mostly historians might not be accustomed to. I'm also looking forward to discussing it with you. I have one sad thing to say for those who are following us on YouTube, and that is that due to legal reasons, we have to close the connection right now. So you will not be able to take part in the discussion. I do, however, encourage you, if you have any questions or comments, please write them to us by the social media channels we have, or just by writing an email or something. So to all of you online right now, goodbye, have a good night, and I'll turn off the connection now.